Hello! Welcome back to Bread Basics. It is literally the most beautiful day outside, so we are going to be making bread outside, which is making my heart very happy. And today we're going to be making pita bread, which is easily the easiest bread of this entire series. We're going to be able to make it start to finish in under an hour. It is just a great bread to have in your back pocket. And it is a pocket. Let's get started. This is actually the only dough where we're going to start with the dry ingredients and then we're going to add in the wet ingredients as opposed to vice versa. We need 1 cup of flour. And this is bread flour. And now we have a tablespoon of salt. And we're going to do about a tablespoon of honey. I'm going to start to mix this up. And then we are going to do our yeast, our approximate packets worth, and then all of our wet stuff. So this is a cup of warm water, followed by 2 tablespoons of olive oil, though you can use whatever oil you want. I mean, this is pita. I feel like Greeks would be offended if we didn't use olive oil. And then we're gonna mix this until there are no clumps left. So this is more or less clump free. And then we need a total of 2.5 cups. We already started with 1 cup, so we're going to add a 1/2 cup at a time. So first 1/2 cup. Stir vigorously. Here we are after the first 1/2 cup. Pretty stretchy already. 1 more 1/2 cup. Vigorously mixing. We just have 1 more 1/2 cup, and I'm going to add it in here and then abandon the spoon, go straight in with my hands. Spoon is done. This is a much drier dough. The moisture content is a lot lower, and so it's not going to be as sticky as the other doughs, so it'll be easier to knead by hand. I'm going to try and tap out as much of this flour as I can, and then I'm going to come back after this has absorbed a lot of the flour and try and get more of that. But basically, as we knead, it feels like it goes from dry to wet, so just keep kneading, and it may feel like it's really dry, but once you keep going, then the moisture that's on the inside is going to migrate to the outside to where you're kneading, and you'll be able to add more flour that way. So after kneading it for a little bit, it looks like this. I wish you could feel this right now. You have to make it just to be able to like run your hands along the surface of it. It is so soft. Okay, so I'm just going to take it and essentially scrape it along the edges. And that's going to pick up a lot of our excess dough. And then I'm going to turn out all the little dusty flakes. And that'll be the last thing that I combine. Exposing it to the ooey gooey center. And pressing it to sweep it up. And now I'm just going to knead it all into the dough. We're basically ready to go on this. But as long as once everything's fully incorporated, we'll be good to go. Here she is. Poke test. Passed. Okay, so we're going to turn on our scale, and this is going to turn into about 8 pitas. Exactly 8 pitas. It is 714 grams. Divided by 8 is...
That is 72.
Oh, yeah. You're so smart. Okay, so this one is pretty pliable, but I'm still going to use more or less the technique that we used in the brioche, where I pull the edges and do a lot of pinching back here. But I'm going to roll it a lot more than I would the brioche, because this doesn't rise, per se. This is actually just going to rest. And then plop, 84, 90. Exactly. Yeah, I used to be a scientist. 20 minutes has passed, and as you can see, they're not like doubled in size. Instead, they've just kind of puffed up a bit and then they've relaxed a lot. So all we're going to do now is we're actually just going to roll these out. And if you don't have a rolling pin, you can always use like a wine bottle or anything that just has a flat surface. So I'm rolling these out on a lightly floured surface. And before I roll it out, I'm just going to smash it with my hands and kind of stretch it a little bit until it's a little bit rounder. And then I'm going to roll it out. And just keep changing directions so you end up with something semicircular. That's about the right size. Size of your hand, it's good to me. We actually don't need a pan at all. We are just gonna put this directly on aluminum foil and then throw her in at 500 degrees. It's very hot and they're gonna cook very quick. They're so beautiful, and look, they're all hollow, and they're the perfect little pocket for all of the fillings that I have in front of me. You may be wondering, how did we get from a flat object to this beautifully puffed up hollow bread? And Moss is actually going to tell us how that whole thing works. There are many ways in which we incorporate air into dough. The one that we are most familiar with is when yeast, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, breaks sugar down into water and CO2, and that's why your dough goes from small to big. But in the oven, that's not happening. That yeast is actively being killed by the high temperatures of 500 degrees Fahrenheit. At 500 degrees, the outside is baking much faster than the inside is. By the time the outside is nearly cooked, the inside has just begun to heat up, and so you end up with an outside that is incredibly dry, while the inside still has all of this moisture. And that moisture wants to become steam. Where does the steam have to go? Nowhere but out. That steam begins to build, and suddenly, Pita pocket! You know, there was a time when they tried to incorporate air into dough, not using yeast. Bakeries used to actually be incredibly dangerous workplaces. Flour all over the place, all the time, suspended in the air, caused an enormous amount of respiratory issues among bakers. And so what did they try to do? They tried to automate the process in a factory setting. They tried baking soda, which does release air, but leaves a weird aftertaste, and that never worked. And then there was a time where they tried to carbonate the dough, very similar to the way that you will carbonate a seltzer. And they were able to. They were able to fill the bread with air, and they were able to make it faster and cheaper. So why does the bread that we have nowadays still made using yeast? Simply put, it was disgusting. It was disgusting bread. Yeast is not just something to incorporate air into dough. Yeast is a transformative partner in the bread making process that totally changes the flavor profile of the dough itself, and that cannot be substituted. All right, I am literally chomping at the bit. I am so excited to stuff this. In front of me, I have a series of root vegetables that I just roasted. I made some homemade tzatziki, and I have some feta and cucumber, and I'm gonna fill her up. Eat me. Eat me. I'm so yummy.